for that wonderful introduction. And I am very honored to be here again. The last time I met Hakama and many of I see a lot of familiar names, was on the 28th of February when I kicked off the Company Secretary webinar series. From my perspective, I have been a company secretary for a good number of years, more than 3 decades, as a matter of fact. And I find that it is so important to put our stake, to plant our own stake. And throughout my career as a company secretary, I feel that the board really has to only do a good job if the company secretary prepares well. Preparing the board agenda, preparing the entire setup, preparing all the papers, and of course, putting it up for discussion on the board meeting day or the board committee meeting day, as the case may be. Today, we are going back to the basics in terms of our discussion on our role in the board meeting. Where do we stand? Where is our place in the board meeting? Do we just go off to a corner of the board meeting room and just stay there, be quiet, answer questions only when we are asked? Or do we say there will be a certain degree of quiet command and control, the people behind the scenes, the unsung hero, as it were? Today, I'm very, very honored to tell my fellow participants that I have invited 2 very esteemed speakers and friends of mine. And first is Min On. Let me introduce Min On as follows. Min On has been a member of the Malaysian Institute of Accountants, Malaysian Institute of Certified Public Accountants, CPA. So no doubt he is a CPA by profession, and also a member of the Institute of Internal Auditors of Malaysia. Currently, Min On serves as an independent non-executive director in several listed companies, mainly in Malaysia as well as overseas. Prior to this role, Min On was a partner of KPMG Malaysia, heading up the risk advisory division of the firm. Post-retirement, he continues his very active advocacy, speaking regularly at a lot of conferences, seminars, workshops in the areas of sustainability, corporate governance, anti-bribery, anti-corruption, enterprise risk management. Well, the list is endless. So just about across all various governance topics, financial and corporate reporting, internal controls, Min On has very, very good expertise currently, I know for a fact that he serves on many of the listed boards as Audit Committee Chairman or Risk Management Committee Chairman. With me also today, by special invitation, is Vincent Tan. In Malaysia, he is the head of corporate secretarial in IOI Group. Now, many colleagues in Dubai may not know about IOI Group as a group, but it is indeed one of the largest, if not the largest, real estate developers in Malaysia. Vincent is responsible for monitoring and supervising the overall corporate secretarial functions of the IOI Group, and his expertise covers naturally corporate secretarial, corporate governance, advisory, as well as compliance. So before he joined IOI, he was with a management services firm, Tricorp, and currently he's the chairman of the National Investigation Subgroup of MISA and the vice president of MISA. MISA really is the Malaysian Association of Chartered Secretaries. And so that chapter, he is a vice president. So without moving, so thank you very much, Vincent and Min On, for this very, very kind participation on your part. Before I move on to the seminar, the webinar proper, let me just say a couple of sentences about myself. So I am a lawyer by training, admitted to the Singapore Bar. That was many, many years ago. And through the time of my career, largely in Singapore, I worked with almost just about all my employers have been public listed companies in Singapore. And naturally, for the fact that I'm there and I express keen interest to do corporate secretarial work, I was also appointed as a corporate secretary in many of my employer companies. So the Singapore Stock Exchange listing rules, corporate governance, and more recently in the last few years on ESG and sustainability were areas that I had come across and very passionate about. In between my careers, I have also done a head of risk job in a healthcare organization. Presently, I work for a professional services firm that is TMF Group, and I'm based in Singapore. Nonetheless, very happy to be with Hakama, whom I have been associated with in the last 3 years. And I've, as Alex say, never a dull moment with Hakama. I always enjoy all my interactions with Hakama as well as with my audience. So today, what are we talking about? Today's special webinar is to talk about what is the role of the company secretary in terms of how we are being perceived by the board, by management, and what is our value add? What is the overall, purpose and meaning of our existence? Are we purely statutory? Oh, so the corporation laws say that we need a company secretary, so we're there because we have to fulfill the law. But beyond just the statutory position, I would like to know myself exactly where do I stand and how am I perceived? So the first question I'd like to ask my panelists, and really is just Minon, Vincent, and even myself. So let me start by the role of the company secretary in the board's eyes. So perhaps I direct this to Minon, who is a very prolific executive, non-independent director of boards. Minon, do you think that the board perceived the role as purely administrative? If yes, why? And if not, why not?
Thank you very much, Linda, for that question. And I guess this is a pretty fundamental question. I do have good news and bad news, insofar as this question is to be handled. Now, while I choose to believe that the company secretary's role is beyond pen pushing, that means beyond just taking a minutes and also compliance with the filings and things like that. But experience shows that there are various levels and various degrees of competence of the company secretaries. It depends on what size and what kind of background that they come from. For example, I have the benefit of company secretaries who are in-house, right? That means they are actually our employees. They know the depth and the breadth of our operations and our nuances and the culture. And I also have the privilege of working with those outsourced company secretaries. That means they run their own secretarial firm and they will use their employee as a named company secretary and they will provide as a company secretarial support. But the bad news right now is I would still think that the board have a perception that the company secretary is to fulfill the compliance role. And they are there because there's need to have a licensed secretary. Now, I have to caveat that because there are some which have actually exceeded my expectation. Let me give you just an example, just to support what I say. Just last Friday, the Malaysian Stock Exchange listing requirements were amended and they address a very sensitive topic called conflict of interest, right? So when that thing came out, by Monday, my company secretaries have circulated the changes and whatnot, what the regulators say. Now, there were some secretaries who told the directors, these are the amendments and this is how our companies are going to be impacted. And this is how, Mr. Lee, as an audit committee chairman, you're going to be impacted. And how we can address that to ensure that we are on track and to bring value to the board. Now, I thought that was the par excellence. Whereas I do have company secretary who just served as a messenger and who told us that these are the amendments and these are the link. You see, so that is where I have a feeling that the company secretary's role is more or less something like what is happening to the internal auditor's role, where people see it as a compliance rather than a value adding. People see it as an assurance provider rather than a consulting role. So that is a status as it is right now, Linda.
Oh, that's a very wonderful summary of where it is right now. Vincent, do you agree, especially having been a company secretary of large listcos in Malaysia for many, many, many years? Do you see yourself as just perceived by the board as minute taker, administrative? What other value add I'm sure you would give to the board?
Okay. Thank you first for having me. I have with this IOI group for almost come to 11 years. And I must say that the last conversation with the CEO, I think he did make a remark that this was a different company secretary compared to the previous one. So before I start with some of the narrative, probably I think we need to understand the background. If I coming from the commercial environment, probably we will look at it is that every organization, sure, they have their own purpose. And the question is, how do we make this successful? How do we get there? And in order to be there, I think most of organizations, whether you are listed, especially, you will have the structure, policy, and the procedures in place. And that also can be say that is merely compliant in the first place when you have in place those are the structure. Now, the question is how do you move from there beyond compliance? So the question is always just now Min On had given some illustration, but for in-house perspective is that you need to move on one step further is that management of the people or the relationship. And because of the people in the organization, probably with some of the functions of the different departments, and also the CEO and the board of directors, and you will need to apply those are the SOP practices and the policy, and to create a good governance culture. You see?
Existing member, yes.
In order for that good governance culture, then I will go back to the role of the secretary where we talk about merely we play as an administrative role or the governance role. I'm lucky to say that so far I managed to overcome that these are the perceptions, mainly because actually I used to practice that as a company secretary, or you perceive yourself as a governance professional at this modern environment, that you will have a valuable role to bridge for information, for communications, for advice, or for arbitration between the board and the management, and between the company and the stakeholders. And so that when you go back to the management, you were able to explain to your management what is the board expectations. Where when you go to the board, you will tell the board members what are the challenges of the management. You strike a balance. So you start the connections and share the communications and bridge those on the informations. And with that, you slowly put it in your effort to the advisory role. Then you can see that it is really evolved. So I would say that the role lies at your governance ecosystem of the company itself. So there's no specific that how best you can do or how you can do it the other way. It's much more rely on the culture, organization, ecosystem of the governance. Yeah, and you talk about outside the listed company, I think you have to divide into large, small, and medium. I think generally, I do agree with Min On say, yes, it's still perceived as a much more not a proactive role in that strategy governance in that process. Whereas for outsourced external company secretary agent, merely you can see is for compliance in the nature of delivering their services. Yeah.
Thank you, Vincent. So a lot there to unpack, given the combination of the ideas that are coming fast and furiously from two of our panelists. To my mind, one of the example that Min On has shared is fantastic. When you have a COI, guidance or a directive coming out from the stock exchange, the company secretary that he's encountered with has already done the homework, come up with the a memorandum of how to overcome or how to meet with the requirements of COI and so on and so forth. Then in Vincent's example, it is not just company secretary and his or her little department. It is a whole culturalization of the organization. So this is where I feel, importantly, from my own experience, we have a role to play in terms of shaping and molding the corporate governance culture, or perhaps just the overall, hygiene around governance. And anytime and every time, not just having this baseline of compliance, we have to look out for new legislation, new directives coming out, new instructions from the stock exchange, and be the first to know. And and it helps that if you are a company secretary, it also helps to have a little bit of a fraternity. So I'm coming round to a new idea of fraternity of company secretaries, where your fellow company secretaries and you can build upon the knowledge one on top of each other. Let me come to a new point, which not altogether, different, but quite a lot of us are saying that we need to engage our stakeholders. So stakeholders, naturally, coming to our mind will be the board chairman, the committee chairpersons, as well as the entire board. Now, I wish to ask this very, very, brutally honest question. Does a company secretary sees herself or himself a friend of the board? Minon, what is your take on this?
That's a very interesting word, a friend. I would look at it this way. After 37 years in the audit and consulting environment, and I was thrust into this board's role. First of all, my requirements are pretty steep, right? So when these so-called players in the corporate governance space is not moving, I get very uptight. Sometimes I would just say that, hey, how in the world can you advise, let alone do the compliance work? So, but over time, I guess maybe age has made me to be more mellow. I do understand some of the challenges they face. You see, I mentioned earlier on in-house company secretaries and outsourced. In-house company secretaries have the luxury of time on their side, all right? Luxury of time to get to know, rub shoulders, not only with the chairman, but also with the CEO and the other directors. Whereas for lines and things like that, so it's a very different kettle of fish as far as these two types of company secretaries coming on board. Now, over time, I begin to see some company secretaries, after sizing up the directors, they will know the nuances. They will know when to really confide in the director, to find solace or to seek advice. So I work very well with one particular outsourced company secretary, very well, because whenever a meeting is forthcoming with all the scheduled plans all tied up, and just 2 weeks before that, or even sometimes 3 weeks before that, he will ask me, Mr. Lee, how long do you think our coming board meeting is going to be? And then I will share with her, well, these are the things that's on my plate. I want you to talk to the CEO. What are the things that he has, so that together we can weigh whether we are able to absorb that kind of number of agenda within the time that's given. Because I, for myself, I don't believe in having, I'm the board chairman, will never last more than half a day. We'll never do that. All right, if need be, we will split it up, because I don't believe that all of us are created or have that capacity to contribute non-stop at the kind of level of performance. I don't think so, right? Because all of us are made very differently. So to me, time management is a very important thing. So I begin to work very closely to one of the company secretary. But having said that, I also have other secretaries who are a bit, what you call, amenable to last-minute item, right? He or she will take on a lot of so-called last-minute items, so much so that they are all hidden under other business, right? So when that happens, there's definitely a no-no, because it doesn't make sense, especially when they claim that in the name of urgency, the papers are only presented at the board. So the question right now in terms of the stance of independent directors, are you prepared just to flow the line or say, no, I don't think we should talk about it. Let's talk about this in another meeting. While we are still fresher, we have time to look at it. So you see, company secretary should be able to tell management, look here, there is a cutoff for issues. So the question is the company secretary able to do that? So what I did as an independent director and the chairman is I actually tweaked my board charter. All right, because the board charter is essentially a SOP for board activities. I tweaked my board charter under the company secretary's role, and then that is the one I quickly slip it in because he or she is going to be assessed pertaining to their performance. So since then, that was about 2 years back only, I begin to see smoother flow. So you're telling me a friend or not, I would say that we are very professionally acquainted with each other.
Well, excellent. I think I can attest to that in that, although I may be acting friendly to directors, meaning, I call them first name and they invite me to call them first name. We, at the board luncheon, I can sit next to whoever director. But I also think that for a professional relationship between board and company secretaries, I would somehow internally in my mind, I would still draw a line. I would still have that small little arm's length. And one of the things I would like to ask Vincent, coming to, unpacking the whole aura of the company secretary is, now when it comes to this very rudimentary duty of minute taking, right? So there are different chairpersons, different chairmen. So Vincent, in your experience, do you think you you have been requested to take long minutes or abbreviated minutes? How has your experience been through the many years that you have been COSEC?
All right, thank you. I must say that when I was in this management company, it would much depend on the preference of the chairmen and the board. Although we always insist that it should be key proceeding and also the conversations and also the whatever dissenting views and how you arrive at the decisions on that particular issue, it should be captured. Despite that, there are some concerns say that it's too lengthy, but I think as a secretary, I managed to advise that it is for the good of the board of directors and also is for the benefit of the management as well. When I'm in commercials, certainly so far that when I'm with the IY group, I must say that we are quite detailed and very specific in all the conversations. And even though there are issues that even though say that it's supposed to be off record, we even though go to the extent that I must share the experience is the sense that we communicate with the independent directors and advise them what is the pro and con if this is going to be out from the minutes. And with the advice given, I think I must say, fortunately, the independent directors took the view that we should be more transparent in the minutes, and we just have to deal with the what is the issue that is not supposed to be recorded, despite there's a disagreement with the management, and the issue is being addressing. So I think the question is always that I can also say that because of some of the board members from the financial institutions and also from the regulators, and the experience is always they want themselves to be their conversation to be recorded so that they will be good defense and also good reference point for the decision-making process. And therefore, you will expect more detail of the conversations. And in terms of the governance process in decision-making, always that even though the chairman have not come to the statement based on experience to ask us to remove the particular paragraph from the minutes taking, but from the experience is that the secretary should insist and advise, and unless the board say otherwise, at least you have a defense because you have wrote your email and you offer your opinion. So these are the things that we must have some consideration when it comes to that. Yeah.
Okay, thanks, Vincent. Well, I definitely resonate with you, and I wish to share my perspective. So for the benefit of colleagues in today's webinar, my own a paramount principle is always to remember a board meeting or a committee meeting is the chairman's process. If it is a board meeting, it will be the chairman of the board. If it is a committee meeting, it will be the board committee chairman's process. And by referring to the chairman's process, it means that the final call, the captain of the ship, you know, the key pilot, the most senior pilot will have to be the chairman of the meeting. And quite honestly, I learned then over the years, and I do get sometimes, you know, very irritable chairpersons to say, why are you giving me 20 pages minutes? So over time and over the years, I hone in the skill that you always have to find out the level of, level of detail, the extent of the chairpersons wanting minutes to be detailed or abbreviated. Then working for many different chairpersons, it then culminated to one thing, maybe not just one thing, couple of things. One, always remember to consult the chairperson of the meeting, how he or she would like the minutes to be. And commonly you will find that the chairpersons would not want it to be verbatim. Verbatim recording sounds rather, you know, it can be looking a little too, too antiquated for today's modern corporate practices. Secondly, if there will be a summary of the discussions and most importantly, jotting down the agreement or the decisions arrived at by the board during the board session would be terrific. And also another thing that I very much agree with Vincent here is that when minuting, you must be careful about confidentiality. So quite a lot of times, you know, listed companies and companies in general, we are talking about litigation. Do remember, if you're talking about litigation and there has been advice rendered by your external lawyers, please abbreviate with litigation or legal privileges or etc. You have to put that little annotation so that when eventually you need to produce certain things in a court as evidence, you can redact that part because it's subject to legal litigation privilege. Just some practical examples of where you can push the limits or where you can actually help your board minutes to be presented in a better way. And overall, always make sure that there is sufficient wiggle room. So the wiggle room that I'm talking about from my experience would be, do not do your language in very hard and cemented way. There must be some room for a small little buffer so that sometimes there can be a little bit of a generality over the minutes or the subject matter. Now, may I then say, this is caveat emptor, this is subject to the chairperson's final call on the style of minuting. As a company secretary, maybe Vincent, you can chime in. Do you allow, does your chairman allow for board meetings to be recorded through tape recorder or equivalent?
Yes, we do that.
Okay, then you have to listen again just on certain parts that you may need to capture. How about Minon, when you chair your risk committee meetings or audit, do you allow for recording?
Interesting. Again, I mentioned to you just now, I actually have the privilege of 2 sets of company secretaries. I find the in-house company secretaries are more familiar with our nuances, our culture, even terminologies that we use. So the in-house company secretaries does not need to really put in a recorder, just in case they must have misheard certain terms. But those people who request for it to be recorded are actually the outsourced ones, which we are not so familiar with terminologies, especially when we talk about, you know, the professional independence, the terminologies of the IESBA. They get the thing all quoted all wrong. So one of the mitigating measures is to get this recording. But before they do that, they always get clearance. And they want to make sure that this is for the purpose of documenting their minutes more correctly, so that you will have avoid the heartaches of getting all those red marks, the corrections, and so on and so forth. So those are the things that I see recorded in use. But I also want to highlight a particular case in Malaysia where the minutes of meeting actually saved one of the director who was not reprimanded. All right, simply because that particular person stated his ground where he disagreed that certain things should proceed on the following basis. And the name was mentioned, the grounds was mentioned, and the dissent was well documented. While the entire board decided to take a consensus and the majority rule, and the transaction went through. Unfortunately, it didn't go down well with the regulators. The company was reprimanded. The board, entire board, except for that particular director, and solely because, as I understand, it was the way the minutes were documented and supported by the fact that because in this particular board there was some hostility. So that recording provide as a ground in the event, you know, the regulators were to send a letter of invitation to drink tea, then these are the stuff they can bring it out as a line of defense. So yeah, there's no hard and fast rule. No hard and fast rule. Yeah, it depends. Like you say, the chairman's prerogative.
Okay, excellent. So we are just having a colleague here who has raised his or her hand for some time. So perhaps you can unmute yourself, and or if you have already posted a comment. Okay, I might just read it as the moderator. Okay, perhaps you can unmute yourself, Ms. Alaglia. Okay, I think I don't think I captured your chat earlier. You may want to resend your chat. Okay, how about Hala? Hala, you also raised a very quick comment. If you don't mind to unmute and raise your comment.
Yes, I don't know if you hear me properly. Hello?
Hello? Okay, can you repeat that?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, maybe you can speak slightly louder.
Okay, so what about now? Better?
Yes, better. Thank you, Hala.
First of all, thank you so much for this very resonating session. I can say that you can feel that you're actually discussing the problems that company secretaries and the challenges they face, regardless of the regulation, of the jurisdiction. I think we have a lot of things in common in terms of the challenges. My question very quickly is, actually it's not a question, it's more of a comment. When you just mentioned the recording part of the minutes and of the meetings. So basically in our case, we have created regulations with regards to the recording of the meeting because ESCA, the Securities and Commodities Authority in the UAE, they have set certain regulations in terms of procedures with regards to recording minutes. You need to get the approval of everyone who's attending, their consent. Sometimes for certain scenarios, you need to get also their approval. So it's quite some sort of a complicated element when it comes to just simply holding the phone and recording in the minutes. Just because there's fear of other board members might object this, they will see this as a breach of confidentiality. So when it comes to the UAE, we have certain regulations with regards to recording minutes in particular. I just want to
Okay, sure. So in a summary fashion, Hala raised a very interesting question about if there are a split vote or there could be dissenting votes. How do you record this in terms of, do you then say that the resolution has been passed by a majority and you name the majority, or you would then say that perhaps you generalize it, in the minutes and post it as passed because you obtain a majority, or you have to even record as a company secretary, you record the dissension. Vincent, how about you? How would you, do this part?
Okay, I think the first thing will be you were to consult your constitutions first. What is the main requirement? Because I think we have different jurisdictions, different set of the corporate law. So if the constitutions doesn't specify more detail, I think general rule is that if the board member does not request that the dissenting voice or message to be recorded, it can be not recorded. But my practice, I will record it. And with the majority of the vote consensus, then the resolution able to pass and decision able to make. Why I say so? Because I have a last experience when I was in management company, whereby the board of listed company, they have agreed, and then when the chairman asked for the consensus, I verbatim recorded it down that chairman sought the consensus from the existing board on the allotment of shares. And after a few months later, one of the board members filed a lawsuit against the company directors. So you can see that sometimes it could be unexpected. But based on the experience, because we know that there will be some boardroom tussle at that moment, so I will be more careful. So I think there are a few considerations. One is the constitution's requirement, and number two is your existing board culture and the dynamic. And then the advice is always to be mentioned specific, and so that it will be for good recording in future when you want to retrieve and then to recall why we say so, and there must be a justification. So at least this is much more clear to avoid the some of the misunderstanding of the feeling of some board members.
Okay, good advice. Good advice, Vincent. So Alaglia did ask a question whether if you do record a meeting, should the company secretary get rid of the recording, meaning, erase the recording after the minutes have been signed, or is it part of archiving? Grace from Lebanon said that in her part of the world, the recording are actually being kept together alongside the signed minutes. Now, in Asia, a lot depends, certainly in Singapore, there is no hard and fast rule about recording retention of recording. So a lot depends on whether there's any regulatory requirements at your end in your country or by your stock exchange in that sense. And secondly, check your constitution, articles of association and the like. Or if there are none, then I would say that you can basically keep the recording for about a year, which is what I do, and then erase it as a matter of practice and, making sure that you clean up documents which are no longer required, and recording is one such recorded document. So when minutes are signed, actually, in my own judgment, it is in fact the be all and end all of a board proceeding. Okay, moving along. I want to give sufficient time because we are committed to finish this whole webinar at probably in less than 10 minutes time. I just wish to quickly ask my audience, what would be some of your questions you would like to ask? Can you raise it now so that unmute yourself, tell us where you're from and your name, and after that we can pose it to the panel. Okay, first one, please. Anybody with questions? Okay. Right. I would like to start the ball rolling. So I am always very intrigued with this question. In-house counsel, in-house lawyer, in-house versus professional management firm. So may I know, Minon, what will be the kind of, you did over the last few minutes did explain sometimes you are quite indifferent, but actually, what do you think? Is there a difference in standards?
I would tend to be quick with this. I think definitely there is a standard, and the standard is sometimes can be a great chasm between the two. First and foremost, timeliness of minutes of meeting is always a bane to most directors. Especially those company secretaries who are inundated with work, and even though your board charter says that no draft minutes are supposed to be drafted and disseminated for comments within 5 working days, it is most of the time it is like 2 weeks before the next meeting. Now, if you ask me, what you took for breakfast yesterday, I will have difficulty recalling. What more when it is 3 months later? So I generally find the in-house one to be a bit more proactive, and also at the same time, they are more knowledgeable. So when it comes to minutes writing, there is a tendency where there is less errors, less correction, less thoughts getting wrong as compared to the outsourced ones. Now, again, I must also say that the outsourced ones also have boon, right? Rather than the bane, the boon, that means the advantages, because they serve a wide plethora of clients from different sizes, different industry. So with the knowledge that they gain, they are able to provide life examples and the better practices and the pitfalls to avoid, so that the company that I'm a director, I can hear both sides and to make an informed decision. For example, just now we talk about the question of dissension, whether you should be allowed to record or not. I just want to put the discussion in Malaysia because of cases that have been investigated by regulators. Our Malaysian Code on Corporate Governance 2021 version, they came out in April 2 years ago. Very specifically, our Securities Commission of Malaysia took upon the trouble to put in the guidance that the company secretary must ensure all this dissension are properly documented, and the grounds for dissension must be documented. You can't say, I don't agree because my gut feel, right? So that in a way will help to put down the ring fence to the directors. For example, if we are talking about a major acquisition and the information given by management is not adequate to come to an informed decision, right, to discharge the responsibilities under the Companies Act, obviously the firm would either abstain or disagree. So now that is going to be instrumental later on if the project runs into a loss, and if there are new shareholders coming, the new management can step in the shoes of the company and sue the directors. In Malaysia, we are full of such examples. Now, those minutes, again, are very, very instrumental. Now, if you deal with external company secretaries, they would know the risk as compared to in-house, because in-house probably they have not experienced that. So these are the different what you call the pluses and the minuses of the different sets of company secretaries.
Yeah, thanks, Minon. Well, as an in-house company secretary all my life, I will always tell myself and others, please hire in-house company secretary as opposed to go for outside company secretary services. But that's because I also want to promote my own expertise, so to speak. Ms. Alaglia, you have another question? Alaglia raised his or her hand. Do you want to unmute and ask a question?
Yeah, sure. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Linda. Thank you, everyone, for this informative session. Regarding the pages of the minutes, is there an average of, as a best practice, not exceeding like 20 pages, or like there is companies have 50 pages, and I think that it doesn't make sense.
Yeah,
so is there
absolutely.
A best practice, or it depends on the agenda, or it depends on the item and the discussion that's going?
Yeah. Okay. Vincent, you take this one. I can add on later.
Yeah. I think to me, it's more important thing at the end of the day is how to implement the decision of the board. Yeah. So effectiveness of the board is much more dependent on how fast and how effective you coordinate with the management and the board and to get it done and see how to line up. The number of pages of the minutes, I look at it is that sometimes you have no choice, but it's just that how you can improve it further if the discussion is more on operational, administrative, then that should be avoided through the conversations privately with the chair, and to make sure that it's much more strategy at the board level. Yeah.
Yes, agree. Totally agree, Vincent. There is no hard and fast rule. So naturally, if your agenda items are long, there are many items, it means that your board proceeding will also be elongated, and then you produce reasonably proportionate minutes. So I cannot say, 1 hour means 5 pages, so you have 3 hours will be times 5, nothing like that. A lot depends also, remember, the chairman's process. So ask your chairman, detailed, not detailed, abbreviated, rigor room, or detailed dissension recording, etc. So after a couple of meetings, you will be nuanced and you will know how to produce an excellent set of minutes. Okay, any other attendees and participants here would like to raise a question? You can raise it by unmuting and then just ask Rabiha.
Yes, hi, good evening, good afternoon,
Hello.
everyone.
Hi. Yes,
Hi,
go ahead.
we have a family business company, and now it's 20 years in the market in UAE, in Dubai. And we are willing to go into the board of director to make sure the sustainability of the company after, so I need the advice on who can help me in putting and start looking for the right direction to have the board of directors and to start الحوكمة, what will you name it in our company?
Okay, well, this is definitely right within Min On's alley. So Min On, you might wish to comment. Family companies.
I think we have to look into that, the journey that you are embarking on. I'm glad you mentioned your family run, family control, like some of the companies that I'm on board. Sometimes you have to move, towards the higher level of maturity. Now, you may not want to get a director for this particular purpose, right? If you're talking about moving towards the continuum of sustainability, you may want to get someone who provide on ad hoc consulting, right? Because the moment you get the director will be thinking that, hey, I do have liability. So there's a tendency that the push factor may be higher. But if you're getting a consultant, then you will have the full time of this particular person to help you in your journey. Like, for example, a lot of companies took me in. They said, hey, Min On, I want you to be on my board because I need somebody who helped me to develop a robust corporate governance framework, a robust anti-bribery, anti-corruption framework, as well as currently is a sustainability framework. So with me on board, actually they save a lot of consulting fee, because I don't charge them. All right, I'm a man that who do not believe in related party transactions, so I don't charge, and I do it free of charge. Then I begin to regret, that why I got myself into. But at the end of the day, if I'm a director in your company, I do that. I'm actually safeguarding myself. So my suggestion to you is you may want to consider taking that particular journey, put it into phases. All right, and see how big it takes. So when you are moving towards your target, then you may decide to onboard directors. You may want to onboard directors, you may decide whether it's an executive director or an independent director, right? Because there's no one size fits all. It depends on your journey itself.
Yep. Speaking
Okay.
like a pro. Thank you, Rabiha, for that lovely question. Okay,
Thank you.
thank you. I guess we can allow for one last question from my audience. Anyone would like to unmute and just ask or even comment, not necessarily a question? One last chance before we close the webinar. Okay, seeing none, then I would pose this question to my panelists. So we know that the company secretary is a statutory position. He or she will have to perform compliance for the board. And in terms of overall, it has to make sure, she or he has to make sure that duties are properly performed. Now, let me ask one final, overall question, which is maybe starting with Vincent first. How can a company secretary up his or her game in terms of importance to the board?
All right. For that elevations of the role, I will look at it is from the perspective of the leaderships, where the company secretary or the governance professional who are in that positions, they must have a good relationship with the existing CEO or the major shareholders, if it is a family-owned control listed company, or if it's a government-linked company, then you must know that what is within the culture within the organization. So the leadership that you will embrace is you encourage to promote or to advocate changes for the betterment of the organizations. So in order to up the game, I would say that you must be prepared to improve your own technical knowledge, and also beyond that is your intelligent emotional skill set, which people skill set, and the culture that you're going to manage to create within the organization and the other stakeholders that were somehow able to, I will put it in such a way that the role in creating connections whereby you were able to influence the stakeholders in the decision making, where when I say that decision making is the good advice that you're able, the good practice, you're able to influence the board. Yeah, that could be one step. And after that, you must consistently, like what Min On has mentioned, whenever there's a change of the rules and regulations, you must know how to advise the board by simplify the process and also share how it will affect the organization and the board, rather than just share the information and then they will somehow at the end of the day, they will not want to read the information because sometimes it's voluminous. Yeah. So I think these
Okay.
are a few, points.
Yeah, thank you, Vincent. Excellent points. I mean, on last few words, wise words, may I say?
Yeah, I think in terms of the hard skills and the soft skills, there need to be a balance, because the saying goes, the tongue has the power to build up and the power to tear down. The tongue. So if the EQ of the company secretary is strong, apart from the IQ that he or she can use, there is a way, there are different ways to skin the cat. So when the communication gets right, you get in the right track, then obviously you will appear to be an advisor rather than the pure assurance provider or the one to push the pen. Now, there are some company secretaries, I know that they have gone ahead of the curve, telling the directors things that they don't know. And for them to do it, not only must they understand the business that the company is in, they must also understand the chemistry of the board players, as well as how this is going to impact the organization going forward, because sustainability is talking about the long-term journey. So EQ and IQ needs to have a delicate balance, and finally is the communication skill.
Okay, brilliant. IQ, EQ, overall aura. So I think with this, I would say that it has been, an excellent time of interaction with our panelists as well as our participants. I think that given that there are so many active issues confronting and required of the company secretary, our duties are no longer the ho hum or the normal, if I may say, moribund state of just taking minutes and organizing the administrative aspects of a meeting. I think that it has gone far beyond that. And depending on the area of practice that you are, and also the region, also the stock exchange requirements, I think there is certainly a lot of potential in terms of sharpening your pen, in terms of, cultivating your own mastery, if I may say, as a company secretary. So with this, I wish to thank very much Min On for coming to the panel, as well as Vincent Tan for joining me today, and all the rest of my participants. I wish to also use this opportunity to say that the webinar series is not ending here. We are hoping to do one more series before the year is over, and it's likely to be a combination of how company secretaries may do global entities management, that is for larger conglomerates, and of course the very, very ever important topic, which is the role of the company secretary in the company's ESG strategy. Where do we fit? How do we lead the governance pillar? And how can we expand our scope in terms of our corporate secretarial scope of and the remit to also include all the different requirements of the ESG and sustainability reporting. So I think with this, we're past the hour. It's Singapore time, 5:05. I thank everyone, and it was for me as a moderator, I always enjoy listening to the views of others in the other regions other than Asia or ASEAN, as it were. And if you wish to follow up with a question or a comment, you know that you can find me on LinkedIn, Linda Hoon, and I'll be more than happy to also befriend you, get your contact, and then we can connect from there. So thank you very much, everyone, for participating in this webinar, and I wish you well. Thank you, Alex.
Thank you, Linda.
Thank you, Hakama. Thank
you.
you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you very much.
Okay,
Very, very interesting.
bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.